Hey folks, I've got virtually every battery-powered weed eater available from Lowe's, Home Depot, and Walmart. And I'm going to walk you through each one, pros and cons, and also give you my recommendation. And I'll also point out that if you like the name brand stuff, the Walmart Heart version is the identical copy of one of these name brands. I'll show you which one later in the video. There are really two classes of these battery-powered weed eaters, and I'm going to spend the most of the time on the larger class, the bigger, heavier ones that have two strings coming out of the head versus just one, and these small ones. These are, I'll talk about those later in the video, but they aren't comparable to these here. When considering one of these name brand good ones to buy, the major factors that I considered are the price, and I'll talk about that on each of these, the weight with the battery and just how it feels overall, how much power they provide, which is a little bit subjective, but I'll give you my opinion there, and then also how long it takes to charge the battery when it dies. That's also going to be important if you have a large yard or if you got a lot of use that you need to use at a time. As far as price goes, the most expensive are the Dewalt and the Toro. They're going to be anywhere from $230 to $250 each. The Ego can be as cheap as $200 depending on which version you get. And they've got one with a carbon fiber shaft, and then they've got one that's got a bigger battery, and those can be anywhere up to $300. But generally, these three are all in the same price range. The Kobalt I paid $180 for. I paid $180 for the Ryobi, and I paid $155 for the Walmart Heart brand. And then lastly, I've got this older Ego. I paid $200 for this 7 years ago. I don't use it as often now that I've got some of these newer ones, but it's been around for a long time and it still works great. When it comes to runtime, how long these things will run on a single battery charge, they're all comparable. The Kobalt wins, lasts about 43 minutes on a single charge. Ego, 35 minutes, and the rest of them are all in that range, 35, 30-ish minutes. So the Kobalt wins. This is the 40-volt Kobalt. But what's really key is how long does it take to recharge the battery after you run out? That's where, while this is the longest runtime, it's also the longest recharge time. 2 hours and 20 minutes is how long it took me to recharge the Kobalt from dead, whereas the Ego, with nearly the same amount of runtime, takes 35 minutes to recharge. That's a huge one, and this is the best by far. The Toro is quite long, 1 hour and 40 minutes. These other ones are about 1 hour and 15, 1 hour and 20. And then this smaller 24-volt Kobalt is a little bit of a smaller battery, so it doesn't last quite as long. But it's a similar about 1 hour and 15 minutes of charge time. When it comes to how much power each of these has, one way to think about it is how thick of string you can use in each one. In the Ego, the Ryobi, and the Heart, you can use up to 0.095 inch thick string. All the others are 0.080 inch thick string. So that doesn't necessarily talk to power, but you generally would need a more powerful motor to spin the thicker string and what it could cut. That being said, they're all similar, but I would say that the Ego has slightly more power than these others, but not by a mile. So I think they all have sufficient power to do what you need them to do. And most of them have a high and a low speed version. So the high speed, you can cut thicker things with it. The Ego has a switch for low and high, the Dewalt, the Kobalt. The Toro does not. And then the Heart brand does, whereas the Ryobi does not. So some versatility there. And for the most part, they all are comparable and can do what you need to do. When it comes to how heavy these things are, that's a major factor to a lot of people. The heaviest of these big ones here in the middle, the Ryobi and the Heart, those are both 11 pounds each. Ego slightly lighter, about a half pound lighter, 10.6 pounds. The Toro and the Kobalt both come in at a shade under 10 pounds. The Dewalt is 8.8 pounds, so a full pound lighter than these two, and 2+ pounds lighter than that. or about 2 pounds lighter than that. And then lastly, this Kobalt, this 24-volt Kobalt, I haven't spoken a whole lot about, and it really is the smallest and lightest. This is 6.5 pounds, a much smaller battery, and that's a big part of it. It doesn't have quite as much power, and I didn't mention that as clearly in the previous section. And I teased earlier about the Hart Walmart brand being identical to another one of these major brands. It is identical to this Ryobi. So to start with, you're probably curious if I'm really telling the truth here. Here are the two batteries, the Ryobi and the Hart. You can see those are essentially identical. They don't fit into each other, and they've made it so that you can't, but they're both 40 volt. Everything's the same. So batteries are identical. If we now go around to the head, there are the two of the Ryobis on the right. You'll see the head is identical on both. The way that the cover attaches to both is the same, virtually identical. So almost certainly the same company built them. And then when you listen to these things run and when you feel these things run, they are identical. You can see that the Hart has the high-low switch on it, whereas the Ryobi doesn't. And now back to the top end here, even looking at the triggers on these two, they are identical. You can see the Ryobi trigger. Hopefully that's clear. And then the Hart trigger. They're identical. So you'll have to trust me on that if it's not clear from the video, but these are identical weed eaters. And considering I spent $179 on the Ryobi and $155 on the Hart, since they're the exact same one, there's no question in my mind, if you like Ryobi stuff, you might as well buy this Hart brand from Walmart. And I'll put in the description field the model numbers of each of these so that you know what you're looking for. A couple last nuggets here before I go, and then my final recommendation. The Walmart weed eater, this Hart, came with this additional head. This additional head has blades on it versus the string, and takes all of 15 seconds to take the string head off and to put this one on. And then you can cut through heavier brush with this because these blades are thick plastic. And again, paid $155 for this, saved 25 bucks, and it came with an additional head. So Walmart didn't do a bad job giving you your money's worth. What I'll say about these three that are on my left, each of these only has one string coming out of the head versus two like all these other, and it's because they're underpowered. That said, they're all anywhere from $50 to $100. I paid $90 for this. I paid $100 for the Craftsman, but it came with a blower as well, and I think I paid $69 for the Craftsman, for the Walmart Hyper Tough version. They're only good if you've got a tiny yard, and I mean tiny. They all have one feature where you can turn the head 90 degrees and use it as an edger to edge your sidewalk. But generally speaking, there's no comparison between those and these others. Which one do I recommend out of all of these? Well, I've got a couple of recommendations, but I believe my favorite is the Ego, the amount of power they have, how easy it is to add and replace string, which I didn't talk about on these others, but this is the easiest. And almost all versions of the Ego that you can buy have a green button on the head that you put the string in and push that button and it will wind the string for you. So very, very easy. So the Ego, really easy to reload, lots of power, and the charge time of 35 minutes can't be beat. It blows these others away. The quality of all the Ego products is so good, and there's so many other Ego products you'll quite likely want at some point. And if you buy them with batteries, if you've got a second battery, by the time you charge one and reuse the other battery going around your yard, the second one is charged and ready to go. So I've got a chainsaw and so many other things on Ego. I favor the Ego. That said, several of my family members really like this Kobalt one. It's easy to use, it feels kind of light, and gets the job done. The Dewalt is very popular. I have no complaints about the Dewalt. The Hart and the Ryobi really are bringing up the rear. I think you will get a product that works, but considering the Ryobi is only about $20 to $40 less than some of these other ones, I'd say there's no contest there. I wouldn't buy these over this, although this at the price point of 150 bucks and it comes with the blades, it did pretty good. And when I put it on high power, I'm not unhappy with this Walmart version. So if you're on a tight budget and you want a battery powered, this one isn't terrible. And then this Toro, this is kind of in the middle of all of them. It's got good power, the charge time is longer, but it feels light, and it is lighter than some of these other ones. So I don't think you can go wrong with this. And then there's one that I didn't review this year that you can get at Lowe's. It's the Skill brand, S-K-I-L. I reviewed that a couple of years ago, and I didn't buy it, I didn't keep it, and I don't have one now. Yeah, I had a problem with the trigger on it, and I took it back because it was possibly defective. A lot of folks commented and said theirs are great, so perhaps it's great, but I don't have one here to review. If you've got an opinion on any of these, maybe you have one or you've got questions, feel free to leave a comment, especially if you've got something that might be useful for somebody else. I'd appreciate a like and a subscribe if this was helpful. And like I mentioned, I've got how-to videos on all of these about replacing the string. So you can find my channel and that'll be useful for you as well. Good luck to you. Thanks for watching.